Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love, Shamika Michelle, and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-hosts Shamika Michelle and Wilfred Riley. And our guest this week is Toto. He is the founder of Hollywood in Toto, author and movie critic. Christian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we were looking for someone to come on and give us the truth and talk about what's going on in Hollywood, how it's affecting things. You know, we hear a lot of talk. We talk a lot about the culture here, and we talk to a lot of people about education, a little bit of politics, and we always talk about how those things affect the culture, and they talk about academia and education so much, but a lot of this is driven by what happens on the screen and what happens in entertainment. So a lot of that today is doing a disservice to our culture, and I wanted to talk about that a bit, and you're right in the heart of it. So talk a bit about that, about what it's like to write on it, to watch the films that are coming out, and just your day-to-day life in reporting on entertainment.
Well, you know, it's funny. I started out as a little kid watching Abbott and Costello movies with my dad, and I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing right now. And I got into the business strictly for the love of movies. I just wanted to share my reviews. I had my opinions. I used to kind of argue with my buddies back in high school about what I liked and didn't like, and we'd have great conversations. And in a way, what I do is kind of an offshoot of those conversations, you know, usually based on an appreciation of films. But then, you know, once you get into a business, and once I became a full-time film critic, you learn more. There are layers to it. There are complexities. And then I think in recent years, well, movies have always had a message, and often that's a very wonderful thing. Sometimes they can be a little heavy-handed. They can be veering towards propaganda, and they're usually, I guess, from an ideological point of view, usually from one direction, not the other. And I think that's a bit of an imbalance. I mean, I don't think there should be any hard and fast rules. You need X amount of these movies and Y amount of those movies. But it's certainly, I think the powers that be in Hollywood, the actors, the screenwriters, the directors, they really have come to recognize the power that they have over the culture, that when they do things, when they say things, when they share things, that it can impact the way we think, the way we feel, the way we respond to different things in life. It could be politics, it could be fashion. You know, I always point to the Rachel haircut back from Friends. You know, that was just a thing. It just happened. It's just that she was a beautiful actress. She was funny. She was charming on the show. She had an interesting hairdo, and women wanted to look like her, or at least emulate that look. And all of a sudden, there it is. And certainly it wasn't planned. I don't think the people behind Friends said, oh my gosh, we've got to create a hairstyle phenomenon. Let's do it now. You know, so often it's organic, and I think it's kind of fun, but it does show you how the culture can be shaped or nudged or influenced by what we see on screen. It's a very powerful medium.
So, Will, Shamika, what are your thoughts just in general on the entertainment? You know, like I said, we talk a lot about entertainment, about education and politics and how that affects the way people act with, you know, film and movies and things of that nature, and TV and celebrities, you know, kind of craft. I mean, we talk about some of the stuff they tweet, but just in general, you can make a piece of art that pushes people and kind of nudges people to believe a certain thing or think a certain way. So how do you think, just in general, that affects the culture? And then lately with the way they're addressing it now, how it's affecting the culture? Will?
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if Shamika wanted to go first. Yeah, so I mean, I think obviously the arts have a very powerful influence on the culture. I mean, I come from a business background, Charles. I mean, you do too, and it's tempting to make fun of that, like, oh, those hippies over there, theater kids. But the reality is that, I mean, a major motion picture or something like that, I mean, a major book shapes the culture for years to come. I mean, even the description of the silly hairstyle from the TV show being something people rocked. I mean, I remember coming from a more Black and integrated community, people were doing some of that same kind of silly crap, like the different fades and styles in the 90s that were represented in the media. So yeah, I don't really
play, right? They were out that got the kid playing.
Well, people were just doing stupid stuff. I mean, like when I was a little kid, some people actually wore their clothes backward. But I mean, I'm a slightly younger guy, so like I remember the rapper Nelly came out and he cut himself shaving. He was a younger cat, so he had a Band-Aid on his face. And I mean, there were kids walking around high school with Band-Aids on. So there's no doubt there's that power of pop culture. And I mean, to some extent, I've seen that myself. Like I wrote, I mean, Hate Crime Hoaxes to some extent an academic book. There's just a breakdown of all these hate crime cases and like my analysis. But I talked about it on Tucker Carlson. It was reasonably funny. And all of a sudden, you know, I'm glad to hear this. I live in a new house now, but all of a sudden people started buying these. And that's the power of kind of pop insight. I don't really have anything deep to say there. Like, yeah, of course, talking to 200 million people, however many see a blockbuster movie is going to impact the culture. The issue, kind of last point here, but I mean, I think I looked up some of Christian's writing. And a lot of it's really interesting, like the why Gutfeld matters piece and this kind of stuff. I mean, I noticed you work with the Daily Wire, and they seem to be, from a business perspective, I'm interested in whether they're ever going public, but trying to do culture from the right, which is something we've seen pretty rarely. Yeah, I guess that's really the point. The issue is that the culture for so long, like the Marxist writer Antonin Gramsci a long time ago said that their RIDs, as he put it, were never going to be the big power in business or agriculture, the military. He's absolutely right about this. Even athletics. I mean, beyond the front office. I mean, they're not too woke out there on the field. So what he said was that people that are on the left that are coming from that kind of theater kid, chain society perspective need to take over discourse like the media, academia, film. And that's happened. I mean, like in my own field of academia, it's like 95-5 in the social sciences, left to right. I assume it's pretty similar in Hollywood. So you have this incredibly powerful medium, and it's now become very political. What does that mean?
Right.
And sometimes when the art is political, people either ignore it or refute it or go against it because it seems so calculated. That's why I mentioned the Rachel haircut, because it just happened. And like the music, the singer with the scar on his face from shaving, he didn't plan that. It just happened. And I think sometimes that's when culture is the most powerful, when it's sort of unexpected, when people kind of organically gravitate toward it. So that's another sort of side of this conversation.
Yeah, as a quick follow-up line there, one of the things that I've noticed with woke stuff is that it's gotten so over the top that it's left a real opening, like for you guys at DW. Like it's the impression I can think of. I had a very evangelical girlfriend briefly in high school, but I mean, whenever I listen to Christian rock music, it's like, this is terrible. And it's not terrible because the musicians are untalented. It's terrible because it's just so up in your face. Mm-hmm. Like there'd be a song called Let Me Tell You Who I Love. And it wasn't subtle 1960s, like listen to the bronze man speak. The next chorus, they would say Jesus. And it's just like, well, that was my reaction too. Like, get this trash out of the truck. Like, I mean, I get it. You like God, and I'm not a Hindu myself, but just that you're now seeing that very much in Hollywood. Like, I watched a little bit of the new Lord of the Rings, and it's not bad, but it's just sort of like the wild diversity among elves, these Northern European woodland people, and so on. It's just, there's a consistent feeling that they're trying very, very hard. Like, the new Little Mermaid is black and played by, I think, a bi actress and so on. It doesn't matter until it does. Like, until it's 10 movies in a row with like bisexual black Northern European historical figures. And it's like, what are you doing?
Well, see, you just made a good segue. I was going to wait till later to bring up the mermaid. But so in your intro, when I talked about your site and your writings, and I didn't mention a new book, which we'll talk about. So Virtue Bombs, right? Yeah. So in the book, you talk about all this stuff, what's going on, how they put, and you talk about woke. And the problem with it is, and so I try not to get deep into as much as I talk about the culture, but not to get into these arguments with people about each and every, specific issue. But the two interesting things about your book, you give good examples from people that you talk to, and what you see in the industry, but also it points, you go back and you say, well, this happened and this was 2012. So all of this is not post George Floyd stuff. It went on acid after that, but this stuff has been out there for a while and it just started to move in this direction. So to Will's point about the mermaid thing, I posted, I waited several days, then I posted a satirical thing about it, not like serious, and people attacked me thinking I'm being serious. I think I said something, I guess the girl's name is Halle. So I said, I see all this debate, but I don't understand. In my opinion, Halle Berry's too old to play the mermaid anyway. And, you know, people like corrected me like serious. And people had to say, I don't think he's serious. But I get that it's not that big of a deal. So the people who are beating up on conservatives, you all are whining, you say you hate Disney, and now you complain if you don't care why you whine. But I don't think they understand the point. The greater cultural point where I see things isn't about that instance. It's about when you deliberately do these things, when you say, I'm going to, you talk about this, I'm going to make this movie, remake this movie, just make it with a woman's cast because it'll be cool. It's not like you just said, I'm a woman and I got an experience that's not out there, so I want to tell my story. I think most normal people would say that's great. But when you say, man, I'm just going to take the Magnificent Seven and make them 7 women, then some people are just going to say you're being lazy and you're virtue signaling. And I think an even better example, because it's not in your book, only I'm sure it would have made it only because it's so new. I'm in New York and I was watching the local news the other day. And so, and this is a great example of why the mermaid doesn't matter, but it matters. So they're watching I'm watching the news and they get, and they're talking about this, you know, it's New York, so Broadway. So I don't know if you even know this, Shamika. I want to see what you have to say. So Broadway, in the news, they announced that they have their first trans woman playing Roxy Hart, right? That's the Renee Zellweger character from the movie, right? But on Broadway. So playing Roxy Hart. Now, some people say, what's the big deal? And if you have a problem with that, is something wrong with you? No, I had a problem with the coverage. So they're announcing it's a news story. It's not at the end after the sports. It's right. It's like the second story. And so it matters. And so they bring him out and do the thing and say this transgender woman, she's going to be the first one playing Roxy and whatever. Nobody's talking about is taking the place of a woman actress. And then they're excited about it. And then they go to the people, the other actors and the audience, and they report it like, this is the thing we needed right now. This is so important. And then they get people online like, when I heard it, I couldn't even breathe. I was so excited. This is so great. And my wife, who doesn't pay attention to anything, looked at the news and said, this is what we needed? Really? this is what we needed. So the country needed a trans woman to play Roxy Hart. That's going to change everything is better now. So you see, what do you think about that, Shamika? Am I right that it's not that this girl shouldn't play Little Mermaid, whoever she is? I don't even know who she is. And you know, if you don't want her to play the role, it's whitewashing and you just want white people in roles and you don't want to see black people get roles. It's the nonstop, intentional, in your face, watch what we do kind of thing that makes people bristle when they see it.
You know, I've been wondering what's the big deal about this whole Little Mermaid thing, because for me, I only know the Little Mermaid as a cartoon, right? I've never seen an actual real film about it. So it's not like it was, like we've seen this happen before. We watched, well, I mean, we've seen this kind of stuff before where the character doesn't necessarily look like we thought it would. I mean, we've seen Jesus movies with blonde hair, blue eyes, and we had to suck it up. So I feel like suck it up. The mermaid now is black.
Jesus wasn't blonde? Jesus wasn't blonde?
And no. So, you know, so I've been, if they had changed the story, like for me, when they did Cinderella and made the fairy godmother a man, I had a problem with that, because why do we need a gay man playing the fairy godmother? I couldn't figure out the big deal with the whole Little Mermaid thing, as long as the story was the same. Now, if she was in love with a woman, I would be mad at that part, not the fact that she was black and had red locks.
Okay, so what about Roxy Hart?
So I do have a problem with that, because they still look like men to me. And I just think it's, you know, not a good look. It doesn't make sense to me. So I do have a problem with that. When they alter the gender or the actual storyline, I have a problem with that. But I mean, I love the songs on The Wiz, but that movie was just too long.
Oh my God. Hold on a second, Chris.
Can I share a quick
the one
point?
thing I was going to say about that, I think the issue, sorry, Chris, I didn't know you were jumping in. The one issue though, that I think a lot of people have with this. Like, Shamika, I mostly agree. Like, I'm a grown ass man. I'm not gonna go watch The Little Mermaid in theaters and like geek out and sing along. So like all these dudes that are arguing a lot online, like left versus right, big hunter looking guys, like I don't know. But I do think that there's a point about percentages. So like one of my buddies actually looked at this. There's a social scientist that looked at how Americans estimate the percentage of different groups in society. And this again is just that hard data. And it was really eye-opening. It was like gays, 15%. You know, black, no, but I mean, like it was like blacks, 40%. And what I suspected and it looks like I'm going to find, like Jane and I are looking at this right now, is that actually is the percentage of those groups in like TV advertising, in new productions. Like if you watch ads on TV, like every couple is interracial. I love interracial dating, but I don't think like when was the last time you saw a white or black heterosexual family with a strong dad in a TV advertisement? I'm just going to close with that. Like
good time.
I can't remember.
1974.
Football's starting again. But
1974.
You said 1974? No, but I mean, it really is a pattern, though. Like, it's bizarre to watch J.R.R. Tolkien and see, like, 27% black dudes or whatever it is. Like, it's just, I don't care about it once. If it keeps happening, it's like, okay, somebody's definitely got this in mind. And the gay elves haven't come yet. That hasn't happened yet.
And so we turn to the pro. Does someone have something in mind here, Christian?
Well, I just want to mention a quick example. I watched a movie recently called See How They Run. Set in the 1950s. It's a murder mystery. It's a quality film, not a great film, but that's kind of besides the point. One of the playwrights in the movie is played by a black actor. And I'm thinking probably in the 50s in Britain at the time, maybe black people didn't get those opportunities. But, you know, we shouldn't have a completely white cast. The actor was very talented. It was I didn't care. It was perfectly fine. But then another role was another, like I think he was a producer, and he was having an affair with a woman, you know, on his wife. And he was having an affair with a black woman, and he was white. I'm thinking interracial dating in the 50s, I don't think that would sort of go unnoticed. I mean, it's terrible that it was a problem. It was terrible that we didn't accept it. But to me, that was like the bridge too far. Like it took me out of the movie. I'm thinking they're trying to evoke the 1950s. And then you have this interracial couple and no one is batting an eye at their courtship. You know what I mean? I mean, I think that's where it goes too far, when it takes you out of the experience and you realize, well, that wasn't happening more commonly at the time as it would be today. No one would bat an eye today, obviously. So
Right.
that's kind of where I think this sort of woke casting goes too far, where it really, it breaks the spell of what you're trying to enjoy.
Well, since we're talking, Shamika, do you want to add something?
Well, no, I was just thinking, I felt like that watching Hamilton.
Mhm.
It was just too much going on. Like
No comment.
Yeah.
I am the only person on the planet with my views on that, so no comment.
Yeah, so that I definitely get that. And then I watched
It's
House
the
of
greatest musical
Dragons
ever.
recently, and I was like, what is this black man doing here? It just, so when it comes to things like that, yeah, I need it to look like it should have looked for me.
Yeah, I think for me with Hamilton, it was
Bridgerton,
the diversity was so aggressive and so in your face and so purposeful. I thought it was just the artistic choice. I mean, I was okay with that. I thought that was interesting and showing the true diversity that America would eventually become better at embracing, as opposed to what was happening at the time. But again, it's an artistic choice, and I think the fact that it happens so often, it happens often in a clumsy fashion. At the end of the day, if that little girl from Little Mermaid enters the audition and she kills it, and the producers say, we've got to get her, then that's great. I mean, that's what you want. You don't want it to be like, well, we need to have this diversity here and there, and we'll just find someone. You want the best talent. And if it's whoever their background is, then that they should have the part.
Yeah.
And that is true too. But when the last piece I want to say, when Will was saying it's kind of weird that these burly guys who aren't going to see the film are fighting over it, and he's right. But at the same time, I saw comments where he went in there and she was the most talented, and that's why she got the job. Stop complaining. But I'm like, but how do you know? It's not like you were there. You don't know she was the most talented. You don't know who was she.
Though she can sing. She
can but you don't know who she was up against.
Under the bus, like she
can
really sing.
Right, but you don't know who she was up against. You don't know that she was the most talented. Maybe she was. I don't know.
And at the end of the day, if the movie comes out and she's wonderful and the movie is a sensation, who cares, right? I mean, then it all worked out.
All right, but you mentioned the term woke cast, and there's others. So you talking that there's a chapter in your book about virtue signaling, and you talk about the people who do these things, but they don't really mean it. Or there's another thing where they do the same thing, but based on, you know, how conservative you are, or how, you know, strongly you profess your leftism, you get away with certain things. But you give these real life examples that we can all look up and remember. So you talk about, well, okay, so the mermaid might be fine, maybe trans Roxy's okay, but what about Anne Hathaway apologizing to people with limb differences? You know, Shamika, yeah, tell Shamika about that one, the role she played and how she had to apologize for that.
Yeah, I believe it was Witches. I wrote the book a little while ago, so my memory's fading, but she was in this fantasy film and she was playing a character, and her fingers were, I think maybe there were 3 fingers instead of 5. And that was just part of the character, part of the image, part of the visual. And there are some people, sadly, who have disfigurement in that way, and they don't have 5 fingers, they have 3. And so I guess someone complained about it, and Anne Hathaway had to apologize for performing in that film in that fashion. And
Wow.
it seems like, you know, you could really find anything to complain about. You know, my wife battled breast cancer 2 years ago, and I was watching something very recently, and the character in the movie was in the shower, and she was feeling here, and she felt a lump. And it was part of the narrative, but it rocked me because I lived through that with my wife. Should you block that because I'm offended or I'm upset or I've got a personal connection? Well, we can't. This is art. Right. These are stories. And what bothers me, you know, in a way, won't bother 99.9% of people. So this whole thing where we can't take art, we can't accept art, we need protection from art. I don't think that's I don't think it's a healthy path.
But you one good thing about the book, for those who, it's been so much coming at us over the last couple of years. You did a nice, you know, flashback to remind us of some of these. Some of them I knew, most of them were big news that you forget. So you talk about all of the people who had these things. This person was really leftist, but they did this, and then the mob came for them. It was the limb differences. It was Scarlett Johansson's basically, you know, Hollywood royalty. Yeah. Oh, you can't play a trans woman though. You got to apologize. And then they take the fall, and then they fall on the sword, and then they apologize time after time. Then the worst ones, I guess, are the ones you didn't write about this in the book because it's more recently, with kind of like a Macy Gray, where your first instinct is to do the right thing. The normal thing is like, I didn't do anything wrong, I'm not apologizing, and then you apologize, and that turns out looking even worse than the groveling at the beginning, because you don't really know. No one even believes what you're saying. So yeah. Right. You talk about all those. And obviously, like I said, the you know, somebody can wear blackface over here and their career's over, but Kimmel is the Teflon Don, because you had many examples of Kimmel just doing everything. Man show, let me show me your boobs, hop up and down on a trampoline, blackface, cursing people out, and they're all fine. But then other people do it and they're instantly gone. But one thing, you talk about how they did some things. They do some wonderful things. You talk about some things that people do to give back. But because they don't know enough a lot of times about the things, I want to say ask you about the good intentions that go wrong when they do things. And I think about, you know, all the people who ran to, you know, Jussie Smollett's side, of course, initially, if you go recently. But if you go back, Bob Geldof and Live Aid and those kind of things. So people remember all the money they raised in the music and all that, but people don't remember what happened after We Are the World and what happened after Live Aid, and how those countries really didn't get any help. Nothing got better, and they lost all the money, right? If it was a government agency, people would rip them, but people don't talk about that. People, I mean, they kind of make fun of Leonardo DiCaprio for talking about the climate and flying around in private jets. So then that's another way that they speak one way and their actions are different. So it leaves me asking you, you've talked to some people and you've interviewed some people. What happens in the real world? Give us an insight. You don't have to use any names, but we have to believe that some of these people aren't as woke as they present.
Yeah, I mean, what I've kind of grown to understand is that for some, it's a defensive mechanism, that if they kind of appear to be woke, appear to be very progressive, and put the right social media messages out, that they can insulate themselves from either maybe problematic work in the past. They could maybe separate themselves from their peers and have a better chance of getting a job. It's a signal to say to their peers, I'm like you, I'm with you, I agree with you, I support the same causes. Maybe you want to give me a chance in the next gig, you know, that kind of a thing. So it's often purposeful. Listen, there may be many people who are true believers. A Mark Ruffalo Of course, he plays the Hulk. I think he's a very progressive fellow. I suspect he's, it's from the heart. He believes what he believes, and that's perfectly fine. He has every right to say it and speak it and share it. So, but I'm sure there are people. But what I hear more of, and this is sort of the quiet part of the conversation, are the actors who maybe lean right, either very right, a little right, a smidge right, and they're afraid of it being known. I've talked to actors. Say, listen, I'm happy to do an interview with you, but let's not talk about that. Or please don't share that I am right of center. And I find, and that's sort of in a way, not exactly connected to the woke conversation, but it's maybe connected in some way. It's important. I mean, if George Clooney is a loud and proud liberal, then God bless him. It's what he believes. He can write all the checks he wants. But why can't someone who's right of center say what they want and write those checks? This is America. You can share your views, and they shouldn't be punished for it either way.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jamaica. She
Sorry.
literally raised her hands.
No, yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, do you think there's a space coming eventually for people who do lean right, or that people like the Daily Wire or more right-leaning media companies will produce more things to give right-leaning actors a space? That's my concern. My daughter is into theater, and it just concerns me. Like, I don't really want her to be a part of Hollywood life. I don't want her doing that because it just seems like it's such a soul-sucking place, but that's her passion. So do you think that something is coming where these actors who don't get with all the woke BS have a place to actually, practice their passion?
Yeah, it is coming. It is being built right now, but there are so many landmines around what they're attempting to do. The Daily Wire, so the Daily Wire puts out a movie. Those actors will not appear on The Late Show. They will not appear on, Real Time with Bill Maher. They won't appear on any of the late night shows. They won't be fawning interviews in Variety, The Hollywood Reporter. All those promotional avenues, those platforms are shut to them.
Mm-hmm.
And also, they may struggle to find other work now because now they're associated with this right of center content. And all of a sudden their career is down to, well, when is the Daily Wire going to make a movie next time?
Right.
So there are real obstacles in the way for this movement. But I think the fact that there's such a hunger for it, that half the country is right, half the country is left, and that people on the right should have some entertainment and some stories that speak to their values, I think that helps. And look at what's happening with Gutfeld. Here's this late night show that isn't a broadcast show, doesn't have the budget, doesn't have the A-list stars, doesn't have all the sort of promotional push behind it. It's the top of the heap. It's the top late night show around right now. I think it's about 6 or 7 weeks now where it's been at top of the heap. So there's a hunger for this. And we'll have to see if it can be sustained. Like I said, there are people who don't want this to happen. And there are journalists who don't want it to happen. When the Daily Wire releases a movie, just go read the reviews. They aren't just, this movie isn't good. It's vicious and vile and there's just, you could just tell the tone of it. I've read reviews of Daily Wire movies where they'll say, well, the action was pretty intense and the performances were pretty strong and this was pretty good, but ... And then they just blast into it. And that's because it's a Daily Wire production. It's as simple as that.
Well,
yeah, so there's a lot there. You answered some of the questions I was going to say, some of the comments I was going to have. So just as a guy who grew up in the 90s and 00s in an urban area, I think it's obvious a lot of these entertainment figures aren't especially woke. Like Jimmy Kimmel was a guy, you mentioned this, but he literally painted himself all black, dressed up as Karl Malone, and did like a 15-minute hilarious speaking routine like, Karl Malone don't like this.
Yeah.
The intro to his show used to be panties optional women jumping on trampolines. So there's protective coloration. Like, I don't think anyone thinks that at home over a beer, his best friend's Adam Carolla, this really is one of the most liberal guys in the world. I do think people tend to ignore the economic element of wokeness, right? Like in a lot of these fields, Hollywood, academia, there are very few spots that a lot of people are competing for. So if you are a good disabled black actress and you're 5% behind the best white actress for a role, it's really, really useful to be able to say, well, this role is only for disabled black actresses. Mm-hmm. And we're now seeing these crazy claims like, should women be able to play quote unquote trans women, so on. I mean, the thing you said responded directly to what I was going to ask, though, which is like, what's the option? I mean, like the old pitch line for Fox News, right? Who's your audience? 50% of the country, and we're usually going to win because we're the only network targeting that group. I don't know. I guess the question would be, where do you see the growth pathway there? I mean, it seems like there's a huge pool of. There used to be an entire group in Hollywood, the Friends of Abe, everyone that was conservative in town. It seems like there's a huge pool.
I don't know if they're still around though. I think they scattered.
Yeah, they ran out of money.
Allegedly they
That's the big weakness in Hollywood and everywhere else, from what I've heard. But I mean, just kind of what's the growth path there? But I mean, also, isn't there a whole group of actors right now that just aren't getting any work that would love to do a DW movie in addition to comedy and coffee houses, that would love to appear on Gutfeld?
Yeah, no, I think to answer your last question, absolutely. John James, who was on Dynasty years and years ago, is in the new movie My Son Hunter, which is a Breitbart News production. So I don't know how busy he's been, but that's a pretty juicy role. He took it, and he was willing to kind of suffer this possible slings and arrows. But yeah, I mean, I think there is a great opportunity here. I think what you see, though, is it kind of bubbles up around this Hollywood ecosystem. It might be a podcast. It might be someone who's supporting themselves via Patreon. It might be a YouTube channel. It might be an indie film. So, they're not going straight forward. A lot of the comedians that I cover, they'll never be on Saturday Night Live. They'll never be on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. And yet they're very successful. They tour the country. They've got podcasts. They've kind of created these alternate revenue streams where they can tell jokes the way they want to tell them, and they survive and they thrive. But they know those mainstream opportunities are never going to happen. Never. Unless the culture changes dramatically. So, Ryan Long, who's extremely funny, is a brilliant sketch artist. He should be on Saturday Night Live every week. There should be one Ryan Long sketch a week. They're not going to go with him. He doesn't tell the right jokes. And he's not political. He pokes fun at the woke a lot, but he is aggressively apolitical. So it's not like he's, Sean Hannity in clown makeup. He's just a comedian who follows the funny where it goes. But it's not the kind of funny that Saturday Night Live wants to tell. And so he has to work around the mainstream. And that's where you're seeing this.
Isn't that only an issue so long as the quote unquote mainstream is bigger than the demi-monde, bigger than the alternative? I mean, I'd rather go on Joe Rogan's podcast one sentence than any, even Gutfeld. I mean, any TV show that's out right now, even NBC. So, I mean, when you look at Rogan, Ben Shapiro, a lot of these guys, Tim Pool in the middle, Chapo Trap on the left, like their audience is larger. They're OnlyFans girls with a larger audience than most major TV stars. I mean, if we're being honest about this,
well, you're right.
The largest Twitter accounts. Number one's Justin Bieber. Number three is like Jesus.
Right, you're right, but it's got to be those. They're all big and they're bigger than the networks. But if there's 8 to 12 of them, it's got to be enough of them. Not even that big, but we got to spread. You got to be big, and you got to spread for them to do it. I talked to a comedian who's pretty popular, and he's done Gutfeld, but he told me that he has friends that won't do it. Right? If they could use it, they need to. It's not like they're A-listers, but they like, if I go on there, yes, all these people are going to see me, but I'm not really right-leaning enough that I'm going to go and live in, with only a right audience, and it's going to turn me off to other people. So they're like, no thanks. So it's that fear, and they see Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Daily Wire, they see those, but they see they're really big, but they see that's 1, 2, 3, 8, 12. It's not enough of them for us all to go to the trough and eat, though. So they need, it is enough to make more people speak up, and then more people will speak up. And I think that'll happen, but I don't know. What do you think, Kristen? Right now, it's not enough out there to make people feel confident enough to come out.
The more people who kind of buck the system, who stand up, who don't apologize, the weaker the woke mob will become. But it's very scary to do so. And by the way, going back to Joe Rogan, you could say Joe Rogan is sharing misinformation. You could have that argument. That's perfectly fine. But A, he is a comedian, and B, there are many other platforms sharing reams of misinformation. And I'll just name one: The View. The View is a disaster on ice. It is terrible. They are ill-informed hosts from top to bottom. But why aren't they being attacked as misinformation? They have the sort of the gravitas of a news talk conversation. Why aren't they being attacked? The system hates Joe Rogan because he's for free speech. He's for free debate. He's willing to let all sides come together and hash it out. They don't like that. They're very threatened by that. And that's why you've seen attacks on him over the last year.
Another thing I like about your book, you did a chapter on the horrors from the inside, and you're talking to people at different things, actors, producers, screenwriters, and things of that nature. Just they're just telling you their name with their name in quotes. I'll ask you off air, but I think I guessed who one of them was.
Okay.
But you talk about these things that they're just telling you, horror stories of having 4 straight shows or movies that get greenlit because they're really good at what they do. They've had all these meetings, they know this one is the next one, and then they walk in and they say something crazy. It's like, we really liked it, but can you make the antagonist a white man, or can you set it in a different country, or can you just this crazy stuff? They're like, no, we were far down the road on this, I'm not changing this. Or can you talk about, I think it was Scott. Yeah, Scott's the one that got me. This was literally the movie about a black musicians. It had everything that Hollywood wants now. And why didn't they want to do that the way it was put together?
Because the director was white. And I believe the estate of the late musician in question wanted him, saw his work, thought he would do the their loved one proud. But they ran into an obstacle because the wrong
and not just an obstacle. One of them had a mandate, if I recall, of not allowing a white director to do a film with leads that are POCs or BIPOCs or whatever you call it.
It's very frustrating, and we've seen in recent years where, well, we're going to make a Wonder Woman movie, so we have to have a female director because that's the best way to. Well, there could be a great male director who would crush it and do a wonderful job. It turns out Patty Jenkins, who was a woman, did a wonderful job, and that's all the better. But why should it be that way? I mean, I grew up with S.E. Hinton books, and she was female, and she wrote about teen angst of male characters and did it beautifully. Woody Allen, for all whatever you want to talk about his off-screen situations, he's one of the best writers of female characters.
To write a woman, yeah.
Modern history. Do we want to kind of sort of?
He thinks of a man, down? And then you say that he did a great job of writing female characters, and I hear Jack Nicholson from As Good as It Gets. How do you write women so well? I think of a man, and then I take away reason. It's possible.
I'm not going to go there. That's all you.
Movie line.
But you know what I mean? Though? I mean, we shouldn't restrict the stories we tell. And if I were to direct a movie about a Latino culture and a Latino family, I darn well better do my homework and talk to people from that community and research it and know what I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, it's about people. And I'm a person, and I can recognize the flaws and the success of that family because I'm a person like they are. The cultural nuances I would need to research for sure. And perhaps if I live that exact life, I might be able to bring something more to it, possibly. Or maybe I don't even have the artistry to do it. And someone else from a different culture could really do it much better than me, even though I might be the same ethnicity of that character. There's so many complexities. I just don't want to limit art. I think that's a bad idea.
Shamika?
For the record, I didn't like the Wonder Woman movie. I just want
I hated the sequel. I loved the first one, but
oh yeah, the sequel was so bad.
It was
so you're a movie critic too, and I always wanted to ask you. So how does it? You've seen a lot of movies. I would assume you watch hundreds a year, so you get an idea of what's out there. A little bit about how it changed. How since the wokeness has really gotten deeper, what the quality of the movies are like and things of that nature. But before that, I feel bad reading your book because I was in Chicago at the time. I don't know how I missed this, but you wrote about how in the latter years, Siskel and Ebert saw this coming in the 90s, and they were saying, well, there's no date of when they did it, but we know when they died. And they were having a clip of them just talking about how this is bad. It's bad for critics. It's bad for movies. The quality is going to get bad if you continue to do what we see coming down. So talk a bit about that, and then how prophetic it was.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, someone who reads my site sent me that clip. I never remembered it. I used to watch the show, but I didn't recall that.
I'm going to guess now.
That's right. I'm going to guess it's mid-90s, but it wasn't woke. It was political correctness. But what they said really echoed what we're going through right now. And they were poetic and they were very powerful in their condemnation of that kind of thinking from the creative side, and more specifically from the critics, thinking that you can't be a critic and use political correctness to filter your reviews. That's not a helpful way to process your reviews. They're right, of course. And Roger Ebert was a very liberal fellow, and I'm so sad that they both died. I love them. I love their work. I wonder what he'd say today if he were in the culture today, if he was all his friends on the left were sort of maybe pushing this. I mean, I see critics all the time who are aggressively pushing things. They will review movies sometimes and say, well, this cast wasn't diverse enough. And just another quick example, Jim Gaffigan made a movie a couple of years ago, and it was about a father and son, and they had some troubles. And some critics were upset because it was about a father and son. Like, what about a daughter? Like, but this movie is about a father and son.
I didn't have a
Don't
daughter.
make a movie about a father and daughter or mother and daughter. That's perfectly fine. But you can't critique it based on that. It's wildly unfair.
Right, right. So what about the quality of the movies? What are you seeing? What do you think is changing?
I think some of the TV writing has gotten just spectacular. It's uneven, but I think there's some great stuff going on, obviously. The movies to me feel a little weaker. The scripts, they seem more like overly complicated. The woke stuff certainly gets in the way. I think when it becomes woke, it's more predictable. And I love being surprised at the theater, especially with comedy. Comedy is all about surprise, where you kind of, you think it's going this way, then it kind of switches over to the side. If there's a banana peel and someone's going to fall on it, but it's coming right away. Where's the shock? Where's the laughter? Where's the emphasis on that? I don't know. And it's funny because I talked to my wife about this a lot because I've seen so many movies now. I fear becoming that curmudgeonly critic who just hates everything because he's seen so much. But I still see good films out there. I mean, it might be on streaming, it might be an indie film, it might be a major film. Spider-Man: No Way Home was enormous fun, and Top Gun: Maverick, I've yet to hear a single person say, "Oh, that sucked." No, it was great. Everyone loved it. It was a popcorn movie of the highest order. So they still make good movies, but there's a lot of junk out there. You got to kind of, sift through some stuff, and that's why film critics and listen to your friends who you trust. That's a great way to do it.
The Woman King. What do you think about
I
that?
have not seen it. I missed the screening. I've been on vacation, but I'm very interested in it. Has anyone here seen it yet?
It's trash.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
Have you seen The Woman King?
Yes, it's trash.
Oh,
I don't
that's a
like
shame.
What's bad about it? I was actually going to go see that movie in like a couple days.
So I don't like it because to me it just romanticizes the whole story just way too much for me. Like all of the women are dressed exactly the same. They dress out, they break out in song and dance like they're a dance group. I just didn't like it. It felt like it wasn't real. So
It was a musical?
Huh?
I don't think so.
I said it was a musical?
I mean, no, it's not a musical, but it's Africa, so they play,
Wow. I'm glad you said that.
but they dance like a routine, and I would prefer if they had said inspired by a true story opposed to like based on actual events. And they push it as if it's going to be very factual, and it's not. It's more fantasy, and I don't think they're promoting it as that. And so it just seems like one big lie. That's what I didn't like. I mean, it's a good storyline, but it's fantasy, and I feel like they should say that.
The thing that surprised me with The Woman King actually was how ham Black Twitter went on it. Like people apparently looked it up and they were like, "Oh, Dahomey was the kingdom that sold our ancestors.
Right,
Like,
right.
They conquered all of West Africa. Then they lost a war with the French." So
okay, did she sell slaves in the movie?
No.
Well, no. In the movie, actually, this is like Shamika can speak on this more than me, but this is one of the things in the movie that people were saying. Like the characters are really feminist and they're kind of abolitionist, and they subtly say things that are just wildly unrealistic for Dahomey and warriors. Like, do we really need all these slaves around? So it's definitely not focused on kind of that true brutal story.
Right.
Like if you ever read like Gezo, the king of Dahomey, he says like Genghis Khan level shit in his public speeches and in the stuff that was written down. Like,
So they were like
sweetest
talking
thing
about
is the tears of a slave and song.
So they were talking about Wilberforce and the abolitionists, and like, we must end this slavery today.
Well, they did act as if they were the reason, like they were fighters against slavery. Like at the end of the movie, the three women are standing there with, swords, watching slave ships, off in the distance. And it's like as if, we're the reason.
Waiting on those customers.
Yeah.
As if they were like, we did everything we could to stop it. Maybe you didn't see the part where they were like,
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, what was the old Mel Gibson movie that took a lot of heat for actually depicting kind of Mesoamerican society, like the movies about people that are captured by the Aztecs? And it's
Apocalypto, I think.
Apocalypto. It's just
Yeah.
brutally honest. And it got a good many good reviews. It's absolutely realistic, but also a lot of negative ones. Like the Aztecs were presented as brutal slave trading cannibals. And I mean, anyone that reads books is like, well, I mean,
I mean,
At the
you
end of the
said
day,
anyone who
I
reads
actually
books.
love these conversations because I think this is what we should talk about. If a movie isn't historically accurate, was that the artistic choice? Was it the right artistic choice? But I want to be able to have these conversations and have the artists be able to tell the stories their way, and then let the public decide. If the public doesn't like the movie or thinks the historical inaccuracies are over the top, then maybe maybe the box office will suffer as a result, and maybe they won't get Oscars. But I want the artists to be able to kind of try and fail or try and succeed. And I don't want, because when the conversation becomes you can't make that movie or you shouldn't make that movie, I think that's where I kind of I want to draw a line. It shouldn't be that way.
So how ridiculous do things have to get before the pendulum swings back? Because it's pretty bad out there now. So I don't know how much further it can go, but I think it can go further. So how bad does it have to get? Now we know this. We're going to end on solutions and some of the things you write about, the things that people are doing, what Will was talking about. But set aside the conservatives standing up and doing whatever, or 16 more Daily Wires come in. What's going to make center left people? The far left is never going to change. Center left people in Hollywood, Bill Maher types. What's going to make a bunch of them say, all right, we've reached that point, I'm done?
I don't know. I often think it could be just one major cultural moment that turns the tide. I think it's probably more realistically sort of a series of events. But I think as the stories get less involving, more predictable, less engaging, less original, I think maybe that center left audience starts to drift away, either going towards older content or maybe checking out a Daily Wire production. I keep thinking that, oh, that's the moment, or Dave Chappelle and Joe Rogan survived cancellation, it's over. No, it continues. And I think, I keep saying Hollywood is show business with an asterisk, because it seems like the industry is willing to lose money to send a message. But if you lose enough money and enough people are losing their jobs and enough people are scrambling for work, then the money really does start to come into play. So I think if maybe the sort of the capitalistic answer is what will happen, where these movies just aren't that engaging anymore and people are hungry for something different. And then someone bold and brave and subversive comes along and gives it to them. And I'd love to see an outrageous R-rated comedy right now that breaks all the rules and is outrageous, but is legitimately funny and well-crafted and maybe has some heart to it as well. I just think that will be kind of a moment where you go, oh, I miss those movies. Let's make more of them.
Well, I'm going to have to challenge you with an author I like, Christian Toto, who wrote about, you said something there. You're like, well, maybe they'll just say, I don't want any more of this, and they'll go watch older films. But according to Christian Toto, they're canceling the older films, or trying to give them a revisit them with a fresh look. So what are you going to do when they're going to say, well, we're not going to show some areas that we don't show this movie anymore?
Yeah, I mean,
we'll show it with disclaimers. Others, the actors that are still alive, was like, I feel really bad about doing that movie. I wish there's a lot of that from Viola Davis and the Help. There's a lot of that. I wish I wouldn't have done it. I wish I wouldn't have worked with Woody Allen, all that stuff. But then you got like the weirdest disclaimer for me was Dunkirk. Was it Dunkirk? The one that what's the one with The Darkest Hour. The Darkest Hour, where they had all the movies around the same period, 3 World War II movies that year. But The Darkest Hour about Churchill, where they put a disclaimer about him smoking. Well, we can't make the movie without him smoking a cigar, because he basically smoked it when he was asleep. So we're going to have the cigar, but we're going to put a disclaimer about, we really don't want you to smoke cigars, and we're not condoning cigars. We're only doing it because the man walked around with it all the time. But please don't smoke a cigar. Now enjoy your film.
Well, what's funny about that is you can go watch any movie today, and they will show hitmen, people who are professional assassins, who kill without mercy, who kill for profit. And we love those movies, but don't smoke. because we don't want that on the screen. But you can go murder people.
Oh,
Be
better.
the hero
You
like
can smoke
Brad Pitt
crack.
in Bullet Train.
Better. You just can't smoke cigarette or a cigar, but you can smoke crack on film. How about that?
And I think ultimately that's where I think comedy should be destroying woke at this point, because there's so many inconsistencies. It's so ripe for parody. I grew up with Saturday Night Live. When I was a boy, I begged my mom, wake me up at 11:30. I want to watch Saturday Night Live. It was
Jane,
part of
you
my
miserable
life.
slut.
That's right. But today they should be all over this topic. They should be feasting on it. Every week there should be a new segment just mocking it, and they're hands off. And it's so sad for me to see, but this is such a target-rich environment from a cultural point of view. It's not even political. It's just a culture matter, and they just won't go near it. They actually did a skit maybe 4 or 5 years ago called Woke Jeans, and they were bland and they were shapeless and they didn't have a color. And I think Ryan Gosling was the host, and he was in the fake commercial. It was brilliant. It was funny. It was cutting. It was daring. It was interesting. I don't know what they've done since then.
Without being cruel, you'd think the trans issue alone would just be an obvious example of this, like the "it's ma'am" thing, or like the teacher with the 40-pound fetish breasts. Yeah. I mean, that it's not high-hanging fruit.
Right. And they have no plastic skits anymore because they're afraid to do anything but make fun of the right, stay in the middle, be silly, and don't push the envelope.
They just hired a non-binary.
They're first.
Yeah.
And it's just an ordinary looking woman. And this is where the comedy should come in. Like their non-binary cast member is just a chubby, facially attractive, red-headed woman. And everybody knows this. So that should be the joke, without again any cruelty to this person. But all of the NB, the demisexual, your sexual orientation is you want to have sex for 3 dates. All of that is just ripe for any good comedian. Like the demisexual is just Catholic as a sexual identity. I mean, like the jokes are easy. They write themselves.
And then they just want to do this just to pat themselves on the back. Last one for recent, because of all the fall season just started, is, so don't go thinking I'm watching Dancing with the Stars. I don't watch that. I watched the first episode because I want to know if these people are really stars and do I know them, right? Because most of the time I don't know them. I like to, this is the one time I want to feel like an old man. I'm like, who is this person, right? And I want to see what thing they're going to bring to pat themselves on the back. Is it going to be a disability or whatever? So this is the best one. I don't know if you've seen it. So I laughed when I saw it. So they have, and they announced it like proudly, the first opening, the first drag queen celebrity. So I'm like, you couldn't even go trans? That's a dude. He's admitting he's a dude. It's not like he's living as a woman. He's a drag queen. When they showed them at practice, it's just two dudes there. And that's like, well, I'm the first professional to dance with another man. And then they showed him practice. It's a man because he doesn't live as a woman. He lives as a man, and then he puts on a costume. That's edgy. Give yourself a pat on the back for bringing in the drag queen. Really?
Yeah. Last season they had 2 women dancing together, and let me tell you, I was waiting every week for one to drop the other because I was just so pissed off. Like, can we just drop her on her head already? I was so glad.
She's the young influencer girl, the JoJo, right?
When she got voted off, I was happy that they lost.
So was it just like the traditional kind of like normally the man always leads, the woman's always right, but it was with 2 women?
Yeah.
No, sometimes they did that, but sometimes they just it would be like 2 women dance.
Yeah, I hated it.
I hear.
It was, you could tell that they were trying to push the whole I'm gay, and it was too much. I didn't like it. I like to see a man and a woman dancing.
Oh my God. So now let's go ahead. You want to add something to that, Christian, before
there's going to be a new Wizard of Oz movie.
Awesome.
I heard that with gay characters.
I believe the director said there's going to be, gay representation. I'm thinking, I've seen the original. I have, my namesake is the dog. I don't remember any sort of romantic or sexual anything in that film.
No,
it was just the little girl Dorothy and the wizard. I mean, just why would you even need to introduce that element? I don't care.
Yeah, how do you do it? So the person is gay, but the person is just doing whatever they do. So how would you know?
Yeah, right? I mean, the protagonist is 9, and none of the other characters are human. I mean, so that seems like a problem.
So they're not really.
I mean, you've got a lion, you've got a dude in a tin suit, and you've got a scarecrow. So I mean, Who's fucking here? It's a tough question. Hopefully not the kid. That's a new level that we haven't explored yet in mainstream media.
Yeah, hopefully Dorothy doesn't bring out the jelly for the lion, because I've heard about that. So yeah, I don't want to know what's going to happen here.
The lion identifies as a minor attracted animal.
Right.
Look. So,
but conversely, if you're gay and you grew up watching pop culture and you never saw someone like you on the screen and now you do, that's a good thing.
Yes.
And there should be opportunities for gay characters, but when it's so obviously forced and it's so obviously done to send a message, it feels inauthentic.
You just brought that to me. I knew I wanted to mention something and I'd forgotten about it, but you reminded me. When I interviewed you before, it was when you wrote an article about the Blues Clues, right? And we had a little bit of pushback because you said something similar to that, like, well, if they wanted to do it and they want to see something identified as cool, and I was like, stop, because it's been almost a year. So I'm going to say, do you think the same way now? Because my challenge wasn't really that I understand what part that you're saying. I think I was saying that what it was implying to young kids was going to get worse. Mm-hmm. So maybe we're both right. Because we see what happened in the schools and in the media, whatever, and it went from, because at the time there were no drag queen hour in the public school. It was just them saying, well, what if I'm a kid and I'm toying with my sexual identity, it's good to see someone like me. But Blues Clues was so young, which you even said to your credit, like, yeah, that young, it's kind of silly, but I can see why if you're 13, if you're doing a teenage movie, you might want some of these characters. But I was like, I think this is opening the door.
Well, you're right in that regard for sure. And I've been amazed the last couple of years how fast the culture is changing, how rapid it is. And I think our technology is maybe making that happen, the speed of a tweet, a digital technology, everything is so fast, it's chop, but it's jaw-dropping to see how quickly the culture changes and evolves. And that could be a scary thing, even when there's a good change. I think people be, I'm not used to that, so.
Yeah. And some of it might be Trump. I know it sounds crazy when you bring everything Trump, but when I mean it, don't laugh. What I mean by Trump is the hatred for Trump is so high. People have gotten to the crazy point. I know they call this the Trump derangement syndrome thing, but this is a little different. This isn't like, I'll vote for any liberal just to get rid of the right. The right is evil, calling everybody a Nazi. That's kind of that. This is a different vein, a different branch of that tree where they're just like, anything that I can stick in their eye, anything that they would be mad at, I'll do. Well, what about the maps, as you say? What about evidence? Okay, as long as it makes those people mad, I'm okay with it, right? So they've gotten to that extreme level that, hey, I'll accept anything as long as it makes a MAGA person upset.
Yeah, I mean, I think both sides have been doing that, and we've gotten so tribal in that sense where my team takes this position and then their team takes that position, and we have to draw the line in the middle, and you can't cross there. I'm a conservative person. I try to question some of my thinking sometimes, or I try to think about maybe I'm wrong on this issue, or I don't want to just in lockstep agree with everyone on my side. It's hard, and I think it's like rooting for the Yankees versus the Red Sox, or vice versa. You pick a team and you root for them, and there were guys in the Yankees maybe I didn't like. I didn't like A-Rod. He's a two-time druggie, but when he came up to the plate, I had to root for him to get a home run. I think that's where we are as a culture.
Laker fan, and I stopped watching the NBA when LeBron went to the Lakers. I don't have to root for them.
There you go.
I'm like, I'm done with you people. I stopped watching completely.
So, I just think that's a really bad place to be. And, my wife is very liberal, and I mention that a lot, because people are shocked that we're still married.
Right.
But also, like, I want more of that. I want to have neighbors who are very liberal and break bread with them and laugh with them and cry with them. We need that. And I think there's a lot of that in our culture. I think that social media and the press exacerbate the differences we have. And a lot of it's real. I'm not going to deny that. But I want us to get to a place where more people can be, all right, we disagree, but let's have lunch. Trace Adkins, the country singer, is very conservative, and Susan Sarandon's very liberal. They're working on a new show together for Fox called Monarch, and they just had a discussion. Hey, we're not going to talk about it. We're different. That's okay. We're going to make the show. We're going to have some laughs. We're going to put on, we're going to entertain people, and that's it. And that's the way it should be. What's wrong with that? That should be much more.
No, that's a good thing. I just don't think liberal and crazy is the same thing. So yeah, I'll invite the liberals over, but the crazy people,
No,
A lot
I
of this
understand
is
that. And you could-
also just social media
true,
to
it's not
chip
the real
in
one.
quickly. I mean, like a lot of these ideas, like the normalization of pedophilia, like you would get your ass kicked in any normal neighborhood, black, white, Spanish, Asian American, talking about any of this stuff. So a lot of these fights are taking place between like the 10% of the upper middle class that's really wired into Twitter. And it's really important to remember that. Like when Christians talking about Gutfeld 7 weeks in a row, remarkable in TV, #1 show, that's because 51% of the country is conservative or conservative moderate. So you don't see that on Instagram, but I mean, you just read the letters, read the comments section on the local paper's website. I mean, it's a massive chunk of the country and an influential one. So
except the gender thing is in the school.
well, that's to me, that's an excellent point, Charles. But I mean, I think to me, and I don't disagree with that, that's kind of the Gramsci thing of like target certain professions.
Right.
And it really is. Like if you look at like schools of preschool education, like stuff you wouldn't think. I'm trying to clean up my language like 5%. But it's like there's certain fields that are like literally my field academically is like 95 to 5 left to right. So there's that pipeline there. And is a group that's made up of 15 communists and a conservative guy going to hire someone other than a communist? That's where the problem comes in. And that's why the Daily Wire and so on are booming right now.
And I understand that, but my issue with the school is, I'm totally with you that it's a small percentage of people that's creating this. We can't talk to the other side BS, which I don't subscribe to. But with the school and the gender thing is weird because academia is a weird, like you say, it's an industry where everybody, a large percentage of people are liberal. But when they start telling kindergarten through second grade kids that you can change your gender or we need to change what's your pronoun and all that stuff, if 50% of the population don't agree with that, why are the rest of the administrators, the people outside of that, the volunteers and the parents saying nothing? Like my kid's in second grade and for the first time, they mentioned it last year for the first time. First, I got a form for me to pick his pronouns, right? So this is not made up stuff. This is actually in the school. And I'm like, what? Nobody else does anything? I'm the only one, so I'm the jerk because I say something all the time.
But the question is this like Satanism on the left and Eagle Forum on the right, or is this something that's really going to go forward for a while? And I think it's more like the first one. Like you're seeing massive parents' resistance. Like Gabs Clark, who we're all friends with, her comment, she was married to a pretty successful trial lawyer. It's just like lawfare is the solution. Like if your school does any of this crap, like if they don't tell you what your kid's doing sexually, et cetera, exactly in line with the policies, sue them for $500,000. And after that happens like 10 times, just that low level of lawsuit, it's done in a major city. That's what I think is going to happen. Me personally.
It's going to have to. So,
yeah.
So to the solutions, Will was talking about, and Shamika both were asking you, what can we do? You mentioned a couple of things you can mention if you like, not here in your book, which we'll talk about. Well, you talk about some musicians. I don't think you mentioned Eric Clapton, but Eric Clapton with his whole, I don't care, losing friends over the COVID thing, but Morrissey and, Tom McDonald and others. So you talk about that, things we can do, the alternative media. One of the things I know this won't happen. Eventually it could happen. But here's one thing that would really help. I just wish somebody would have the guts to do it. What if the A-listers stood up? Right? What if I'm like, I get that you can't stand up because you make $100,000 a year only off of acting. If you lose the role, you're lost. But I made $100 million last year and I'm liquid. So this is what I'm going to do. What if just 6 of them did that?
I've been saying that and praying for that and just wishing that would happen for so long. The Tom Hankses, the Meryl Streeps, the Denzel Washingtons, the George Clooney's, the Julia Roberts. And
we know some of them aren't woke. We know they aren't.
But I mean, just to stand up collectively, because they don't get canceled that they're collective. If it's just one, they could get canceled. That there's a lot of
Harper's letter.
Yeah, and just speak out for free speech. Speak out against cancel culture and kind of erasing people. Speak out against, well, you did something problematic 20 years ago, a joke that was acceptable then, and now it's verboten, and now you're done. We don't want that. And I would love to have them extend that conversation to some of my friends on the set are conservative, and I don't want them to be canceled or punished for their views. They're hardworking people who happen to think a different political solution is the answer. I don't agree with it. Let's have a debate about it, but I don't want them punished. I would love to hear that be said. No one's going to say it. And it makes me sad because at the end of the day, like I said, I got into this business because I love Hollywood. I love movies. I kind of love actors in a generic sense. I don't know them, but I love the work they do. I respect what they do. Why can't they stand up for this? Why can't they put their clout on the line collectively if they're afraid to do it and just one by one? I think it would have a profound effect. And for all the virtue signaling that celebrities do, this would actually change the culture, and maybe quicker than you could possibly imagine.
Well, we have to leave it there. He is Christian Toto. The site is Hollywood in Toto. The book, the most recent book, is the Virtue Bombs. Why did I say victim? Because they act like. And you can read his writings. He's a movie critic. Check out his stuff. Support him. And Christian, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Had fun.
The US of A, land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to save, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving a day.